3, 2, 1. What's happening, guys? This is Logan Robinson from Hear the Spear, presented to you by NoleGameday.com. We're here live on a wonderful, fantastic Wednesday evening. And gentlemen, D-Lou, I hope you stick with us. You're going through a storm right now. It's rainy also here in St. Pete, so we've had some technical difficulties. Sorry for the late start to this show, but we're still here rocking. Nonetheless, Florida State wrapped up their first scrimmage last Friday. So we heard from Mike Norvell afterward, and his press conference will be giving you the rundown on what he had to say. Also, some scoop from that scrimmage. We're also going to talk some practices. D-Lou was in attendance for those. Actually, the one from yesterday. And then there's one tomorrow, right, Dustin?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so we're going to have a lot of content going over to NoleGameday.com all throughout the week on that, so make sure you guys stay tuned over there. And then we're going to talk a little bit of some top 30 visits for some former Noles. We're going to talk quarterback competition. Is there actually a quarterback competition between DJU and Brock Glenn? We'll discuss that because that's been a pretty big chatter all over social media. And then we'll jump into some basketball to finish off this episode. But with me this evening is Austin Veazey, our lead basketball writer up at the top, and down below is our editor-in-chief, D-Lou, Dustin Lewis. Gentlemen, how we doing?
I'm good.
Figured out that.
Yeah. 27 years old. It's also my cat's birthday. Happy birthday to Chloe as well.
Y'all share the same birthday?
Yeah.
Happy birthday to Veazey.
So fun day over here. Not doing anything exciting today, but we'll get there throughout the month.
There's a lot of concerts on the horizon.
A lot of concerts.
And is Dustin frozen again? Dustin is frozen again, everybody. Dustin's frozen again. So we're dealing with that internet over there. You know how it is in Tallahassee. If there's any kind of sprinkle, literally a sprinkle, the power or the internet goes out. But you're back with us, D-Lou. This is kind of how it's going to be throughout the show, I feel like.
It's randomly struggling right now. I haven't had any issues all day, and then here we are. So,
yeah, just some bad luck. It's okay.
Yeah, there was a storm that came through, throughout the day a little bit. It was bad earlier this morning, but now, of course, right when we hop on the podcast, decides to start acting up. But happy birthday to our man Austin here.
Appreciate it.
Yep. Happy birthday to Veazey. He gave us his time with us, even though he's not doing anything today. So he was obligated to hang out with us anyways. And plus, this is like a gift to him coming on here and talking with Logan and Dustin. There's nothing better to do.
Well,
but
surely there is somewhere.
So anyways, quarterback competition. Who wants to know? No, but yeah, we'll have a good episode here. Won't be too long. We'll have a whole rundown of NFL draft stuff the next 2 weeks. We're going to be heavily into that, covering that. So make sure you guys stay tuned to that. Hopefully have some good guests before that happens too, before they actually get drafted as well. So make sure you guys are subscribed here on YouTube. Also too, if you're listening on audio, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, subscribe over there. So then you get notified every time we release a new episode. Tons of videos going out from practice, right after practice, press conference stuff. We got players talking afterwards. So you don't want to miss out. There's just tons of stuff going on outside and on the output for our YouTube. So make sure you guys stay tuned over there. Let's jump into some practice stuff. I think first, should we go? Maybe we go scrimmage first, actually. We'll go chronological order this time. Mm-hmm. But Florida State wrapped up their first spring scrimmage on Friday. This was DJU's first scrimmage as a Florida State Seminole.
It was on Thursday.
Thursday? I keep on thinking it's Friday for some reason. But Florida State's scrimmage was on Thursday. Don't get to be there. None of the media gets to actually be in attendance for that. So you got to work your sources a little bit and figure out some things about what happened. But just listening to Mike Norvell after the press conference, though, he talked about the quarterbacks. Probably start off here with DJ and Brock Glenn. He also talked about Luke Kromenhoek, the incoming freshman quarterback, who, as we know, arrived early, actually got to be there for bowl prep and got some practices in with the Florida State Seminoles. So he's been around. I mean, not only that, but visits beforehand. He's been around this program the last couple of years quite a bit, but now just getting to see him out on the field. Mike Norvell talking about him, saying he felt like his play was outstanding. And I think that's a little bit of coaches speak, of course. There's some times I would imagine, just from things that I've heard, mistakes are going to happen. I mean, just also to the competition that he's going against in that scrimmage. It's a lesser amount of talent, but still, just to hear Mike Norvell and those comments, those promising comments about a young quarterback that they think very, very highly of, one of the top quarterbacks coming in from his class as well. That's really encouraging to hear, in my opinion. But if you want to go into a little bit more there, Dustin, on what he talked about DJ and Brock Glenn as well. This room, you feel really good, I think right now at this point in spring where you're at with this quarterback position group.
Yeah, I think it's exciting to hear that about Luke. Mike Norvell get him some real compliments after his first scrimmage at the college level. And, to me, that's exciting to hear because, he's looked like a true freshman at some points early on this spring, but we've seen him continue to grow and just continue to settle in a little bit more each practice. I mean, for him to go out there in a competitive setting and impress the coaching staff, that's certainly a good thing and speaks to the high ceiling and also the work ethic that he's brought into Florida State. But yeah, then going over to DJU and Brock, obviously Brock has a little bit more of a grasp on the offense right now. And that was something that Mike Norvell alluded to following Tuesday's practice. And, he even mentioned when talking about DJ, there were certain points in the scrimmage where he reverted back to some of that bad footwork that Florida State's trying to get him away from. And, throughout the first couple of practices, we see in some of those individual periods, he's working really closely with Tony Tokars on taking the correct steps off the snap and for RPOs and different things like that. So it just sounds like there were some times when he was under pressure where he just reverted to some of those things that Florida State is trying to correct. And, obviously continuing to pick up that offense, and he's another guy that I feel like is starting to get more comfortable by the practice, starting to get some chemistry down with the wide receivers, getting more into the playbook a little bit. And Mike Norvell said it yesterday, Tuesday's practice focused heavily on installation. And, they're still kind of in the beginning phases here of spring as they kind of introduce this offense to these new players coming in, DJU and also the skill players and offensive linemen that they brought in as well. But I mean, so far through the first 6 practices, I really like the way that we're seeing Brock and DJ really compete.
Yeah, and I want to pick your brain too once we get into our practice observations here in a little bit. But I think it's great. I mean, for me, Brock Glenn, I picked him for one of the players that I think will take some big time strides this camp. He's just a really good listener, and you could just see it in person. Just the way that he listens well, just listening to also to Tony Tokars when we got to talk about him whenever they were get the flip back to FSU. There's so much good just young listening that he does a really good job on. And I think that goes a long way, definitely, if you're a quarterback. And the same goes, with Luke as well. Those two guys are really going to push one another. This 2025 quarterback competition is going to be really, really intriguing to me as we head into the next season. But we got a ways to go. We got to get through 2024 first. One thing, though, probably wasn't easy for these guys throwing the ball was the pass rush. And that's something Mike Norvell mentioned as well. A handful of guys throughout this scrimmage were impressive. And one of those names actually ended up being Marvin Jones Jr. And I think a lot of FSU fans are excited to hear that. You get to see him at practice, Dustin. He's got a physical build, man. What he's put, the weight, the conditioning, everything that he's put together has been really nice. But just to hear him, along with Darrell Jackson, got named by Coach Norvell, along with Pat Payton too. That's really nice. I'm sure it wasn't nice for Brock Glenn and DJ and definitely Luke, but just to hear Marvin Jones Jr. get mentioned there, we kind of already know what you're getting out of Pat Payne and Darrell Jackson. It's just these newcomers that you want to see. Okay, all right, they're getting down some good reps and under Adam Fuller's defense.
It's competitive out there, and I mean, you're really seeing these guys get after it. And like you said, Norvell giving some real props to Marvin Jones Jr. And then we heard the same thing from Adam Fuller, who was one of the coaches that spoke following Tuesday's practice. And, getting asked about MJJ, he said that he is what we thought he is. So it sounds like Florida State, they feel like they've hit on this evaluation. And, it was one thing that we talked about. Marvin Jones Jr., he kind of played a little bit out of position when he was at Georgia in that 3-4 defense. And we were kind of hoping that this move back to the traditional end spot, you'd start to see some of that resurgence and that 5-star talent that he had coming out of high school really pop up. And I mean, I think it has. You look at this defensive end room, there's obviously some incoming pieces that are new and fans don't know a ton about yet. But this is, I mean, man, it's a really good room from what we've seen through the first 6 practices. Obviously, Patrick Payton there, but you've got MJJ competing right there alongside Sione, and then Tomiwa, who, I mean, his versatility, that was another thing that Adam Fuller complimented, the ability to move inside and outside this defense. And I mean, that's not a tough task, or that's a really tough task with what Florida State asks as their defensive linemen to do. So for him to be able to participate or contribute at both positions is certainly a vital asset with some of the depth issues that we've spoken about previously along the interior. And then you can't forget about Byron Turner Jr. I mean, a solid veteran who's continuing to develop, continuing to show up and compete. He's definitely raised his level of competition as of late, I would say. And I mean, I really like the signs that I'm seeing out of him. And then Jaden Jones, Mike Norvell, another guy that he complimented. And Coach Fuller said that he's one of the most improved defensive players on the roster this offseason. So, I mean, that's really 6 defensive ends that you're talking about going out there and getting after at each practice.
Yeah, the room is stacked. And too, you've got some newcomers as well coming in later this summer to add to that room. So interested to see how that ends up playing out, if there's any attrition like we were talking about when we were previewing the defense as a whole. On the other side, so we'll keep flipping around, though. A couple guys scored in this scrimmage. Malik Benson, who you've been really high on, D-Lou, to start this spring camp, the Alabama transfer, former #1 JUCO player. And then also Cam Davis, baby. I mean, no shocker here to anybody, but Cam Davis also got into the end zone there. Malik Benson, I think he's vying for a starting spot. Would you agree with me right here, D-Lou, as we're heading to the middle of camp, where this player has a chance? He might just be coming in as a player that just arrived, and he could be jumping in to be in that top 3 wide receiver room.
I think so. I mean, we've kind of talked about it a little bit over the last couple of months, last couple of weeks, but I mean, Malik Benson feels like he's really coming to Florida State with a purpose, not just a transfer coming in and kind of tipping his toe into the water. I mean, he's really dove in and trying to go after the full thing. And we saw it at tour of duty, his first couple of weeks at Florida State, he's already out there, feeling comfortable enough to kind of take on a leadership role and vocally cheer on his teammates and, I mean, support those guys. And I mean, it's just been even better to actually see him on the practice field so far early this spring. The speed, the athleticism, the shiftiness. He's got some really good routes in his system, can get out there, run the deep ball. You've seen him and DJU connect at times, and it's really fun. So if they can get this connection fully down, these last couple of practices of the spring and carry this over into the summer, I'm excited to see what he brings, because, I mean, obviously at Alabama kind of contributed in spurts, but he was on the field a lot for the Crimson Tide. And I think with his ability as a deep threat and the way that Florida State wants to see this offense operate in 2024, he fits everything that they're kind of looking for.
Mm-hmm. Looking at a few things too, just Mike Norvell talking about a few players that on the defensive side. Lundy was one that he really focused in on. I think Lundy is due for a big season. He was always in that rotational system just because of what you already had in your top 2 with Deloach and Bethune. But now this is Lundy's linebacker room now. And I think Lundy's been a special player, the way that he's developed, and he's been riding with Florida State. Had that thing with Colorado there, just testing the market, see what was going on, but end up, coming back home to Tallahassee. And just to hear him have a really strong scrimmage is huge, because, he's going to be a guy that's helping carry that linebacker room as a whole. But to me, I wish I could see him in person. I'm hoping I'll be able to get up there before the spring game to that Thursday practice just to see him fly around, because he looks like he's in incredible shape, and the way that he showed up this spring camp and starting off strong in that scrimmage is great to hear. And then too, also, Mike Norvell mentioned, went out of his way to also mention some of the other linebackers in that room as well that are making strides. And we'll probably talk about more of that in the practice observations, but it seems like Florida State's linebacker room, one of our kind of concerns was just the experience, the lack of experience whenever you lose Deloach and Bethune like that. Where do you go? And now you look at some of these youngsters, along with now a newcomer like Sean Murphy from Alabama. to hopefully be able to step up to the plate and get the system down. And that's something that I think Florida State, looking at Omar Graham Jr., Blake Nicholson, seeing those guys try to take that next step is something that Florida State is looking for under Randy Shannon. And I'm really specifically monitoring Blake Nicholson. He got some reps last year, just in some playing time, some dead time in games a little bit. But I think we were a little like, oh, who's that guy in number 18 there at linebacker? He's put on some size as well. Just to hear that from Mike Norvell, though, after the spring scrimmage presser, I think is promising for that group where we had a few, question marks, reasonable ones going into spring camp.
Yeah, there were two things that really stood out to me, hearing Mike Norvell speak after the scrimmage about the linebackers. I mean, the first one was him saying DJ Lundy looks how we need him to look. And obviously, like you said, Lundy is the guy in that room, and Florida State needs him to have a really big season with Tatum Bethune and Kalen DeLoach now moving on to that NFL level. And, you're not really having a ton of proven experience behind him. He's got to be that guy, every single Saturday for Florida State. And I think so far this spring, he's consistently showing up. He's acting like a leader, and he's been impressive to this point. Like you said, moving better than ever, in really good shape. And then the other thing, Mike Norvell said that this position group has been one of the ones that's further ahead than he anticipated at this point. And that's speaking to, as you also said, some of those younger guys in the room. Blake Nicholson, a guy who got a ton of praise from Adam Fuller and Randy Shannon following that first spring scrimmage. Adam Fuller kind of said it whenever he walked down and spoke to Randy following the scrimmage. Coach Shannon kind of said to him, "You're going to like what you see." And looking back at the film, sounds like Blake Nicholson has made some real progression ahead of his second year at Florida State. We heard DJ Lundy talk about it as well. He said Blake Nicholson and Justin Cryer are farther ahead, or light years ahead of where they were when they were both true freshmen. And Florida State's going to need both of them to step up, along with Sean Murphy and, obviously Omar Graham continuing to develop as well.
What this picture at least reminds me of, and almost the build a little bit, Geno Hayes in that 10 back in the day, one of my favorite linebackers that's came through Florida State when I was watching as a youngster. But just also thinking about the jerseys too, the practice jerseys. That's where it just comes up to me all the time. But yeah, Geno Hayes and DJ Lundy, those two guys looking close. Y'all remember watching old Geno Hayes?
Absolutely.
I love Geno Hayes. But yeah, Lundy always has been impressive, a guy that's always in the weight room and such. But just seeing him step up into a leadership role, I think, is huge for Florida State and what they're trying to do always. But, this next step, they got to see Lundy take that leadership role. And he's doing it, I think, on and off the field right now for FSU.
Yeah. Like you said, he kind of, he had that little tiff there with Colorado, but it feels like ever since he's come back to Florida State, I mean, he's even more bought in than before and really taken it upon himself to kind of assume a leadership role on and off the field for the Seminoles. And I mean, as he should be, being one of the fifth-year players on this roster and being someone who needs to be the dude at linebacker for the Seminoles and one of those guys on the defense. But, to see him actually do it and stepping into it and no questions asked and no drop-off so far this spring, I've been really impressed with what he's bringing to the table.
Yeah. Anything else scrimmage-wise that you want to bring up? I mean, just overall defense won that day, but I don't think anybody's shocked by that. That's always going to happen no matter where you're at in the first day of scrimmage. Also the same way in the first couple of days of camps. But trying to think of anything else, Yeah,
you mentioned Daryl Jackson. The other thing we kind of picked up, listening to Mike Norvell and also Adam Fuller yesterday, going really in depth on the defensive line. Sound like KJ Sampson had some real flashes, and also Daniel Lyons continues to move in the right direction. And, obviously with Joshua Farmer out for the remainder of spring practice, Florida State, they really need to kind of see those two guys continue to step up. And you also had Grady Kelly, the newcomer from Colorado State, but someone who's played a ton of football at the FBS level. He blocked a field goal during the scrimmage. But, yeah, there were a couple defenders who created turnovers, and I just kind of went back and noted because Adam Fuller puts it out after every practice. But Miami transfer Devontae Brown came away with an interception. So did Fintrell Cypress. I mentioned Kelly with a blocked field goal. Ashlyn Barker actually had a forced fumble that was recovered by a walk-on linebacker, A.J. Cottrell. And Jabril Rawls, the redshirt freshman cornerback, had a pass deflection on 4th down to end an offensive drive. So a couple defenders getting in there and making some real plays during that first scrimmage. And just sticking with Jabril Rawls, that was another guy that Mike Norvell really talked up. You know, he's flying a little bit under the radar because there's a ton of talent, both, you know, guys that have a ton of experience and then some of the newcomers coming in. So, I mean, he's kind of in the middle there, and you don't really think about him as much, but he's had a really solid spring camp so far.
There's just so much talent back there. It's absolutely ridiculous. But there were some guys that flashed early on last year in practices. They're like, oh, okay. So these incoming freshmen have a strong chance of playing pretty earlier in their careers at FSU. So, yeah, I think Sampson, too, if they can see him take that kind of Daniel Lyons step that we saw from Daniel Lyons, really good listener as well, and allows Odell Higgins to do his hard coaching on him, I will say, in the nicest way possible. But if we could see Sampson take that Daniel Lyons step, I think that helps a lot in that defensive line room. And then obviously Grady Kelly, he's got the experience, but I'm interested to see where's his ceiling at. Fabo, Braden, Dennis Briggs, you lose those guys. Where's his talent level compared to, like a Dennis Briggs or what you had with Fabo? What kind of production are you going to get out of him? I think that's probably our biggest question mark as we go throughout the rest of the spring camp to me. But yeah, Cam Davis found the end zone. Malik Benson found the end zone. I don't think that was much of a shocker there, but I think there's some promising things there to like, and we're about to talk about some quarterbacks too as we jump into some practice observations. D-Lou, you were there for Tuesday, had an Easter break for a little bit, but Mike Norvell bringing back the energy nonetheless. He seemed pretty hyped to be back inside the IPF and out there on the practice fields. How'd everything start? How'd practice look to you? Pads, of course, still staying on, but what has stood out to you before we kind of jump through some of these notes that you have written out here?
Yeah, same energy for Mike Norvell on every day, but it's good to get back to a little bit more of a normal week. Florida State had their practice on Tuesday evening, going to have one on Thursday, and then scrimmage 2 is going to be on Saturday, and that's kind of going to be the normal format for the remainder of the spring moving forward here. And coming out of the break, I didn't think it was necessarily the cleanest or the sharpest practice execution-wise, especially on offense. I thought there were way too many drops, especially during the 1-on-1 and 7-on-7 periods. It kind of picked up during team a little bit, but I mean, overall, just too many balls hit the ground. I mean, that was kind of something that Mike Norvell alluded to after practice, but he also noted that this was a day where, like I said earlier, doing a lot of installation, doing some new stuff that they hadn't done so far this spring on offense and defense. Maybe that led to an increase in some of those miscues. But I mean, regardless of some of the execution stuff, I thought this was a really competitive practice, another physical day where, I mean, you're seeing a lot of hitting on both sides of the ball. And I mean, man, these defenders aren't afraid to go out there and lay the wood at times. I mean, overall, really good practice for Florida State, especially coming off a promising scrimmage where we heard some good things on both sides of the ball. And it just seems like to me, this team's continuing to move in the right direction. The new pieces are keep assimilating and getting more comfortable with their roles at Florida State. We're seeing some real growth from some of the young guys as well.
I got to be honest with you guys. I mean, just halfway into camp, about to be here, I think the biggest thing I'm intrigued by, I should say, is probably the youngsters. I mean, it's been such a flip from last year if you think about it, because you had so many veterans coming back. So you know what you had, and there was also some high expectations for that as well. But like VZ was just agreeing with me, there's so many youngsters that we're going to see a lot of playing time this upcoming season, and we're seeing growth from them and development, and that's so exciting to hear. and it's got to be fun to watch at practice to see these kids grow. I mean, look at Azrae Thomas. This guy is flying around and he's making plays, and that's expected because he's been in this system and he's been in this program for multiple years now. But you go even younger, you go to the wide receiver room, go to the running back room with Cam Davis, Samuel Singleton. You jump around to so many other positions, defensive tackle room, like we're just talking about with Sampson there. And the linebacker room, there's just so much young talent that, you look in this 2024 season, you're trying to say, all right, what are we expecting here? An ACC championship, get to Charlotte, how far can they go? It's just, I think it's a fun kind of year for FSU fans where you're not so predicated on that. We've got to be where it was, 4 teams in that playoff. We've got to get there. Whereas, we make it that ACC championship, see what you can do in college football playoff. And then in 2025, then there's some higher expectations like you had in 2023 of making a really serious run. So this is kind of like a little fun year to really understand what you're working with young talent-wise as it develops.
And I think just with having so much youth and so much potential, and, obviously the success of the 2024 season, you've got some transfers coming in, they're going to play big roles, but a lot of it predicates on guys stepping up and performing in areas that they necessarily haven't before, whether that's stepping into a starting role for the first time or into the 2 deep for a young player's first time in their career. Seeing just the young talent and the potential, it's hard to put a ceiling on this team, because if they're able to capitalize on that and continue to have this growth throughout the remainder of the spring and into the fall, I mean, it's a damn good football team. We've already heard Mike Norvell say that this is the strongest and fastest team that he's ever had. And that was before they stepped on the football field. And I think even now, you're seeing that speed, you're seeing the athleticism, you're seeing the physicality, but then it's just also the level of competition, whether it's the first team out there, the second team, the third team, the walk-ons. I put it in my practice observations, but I mean, there was a stretch yesterday where walk-on defensive end Xavier Perkins, who we probably haven't talked about very many times, if ever, on this podcast. But I mean, he showed up and had 2 really nice plays in like a 3 or 4 play stretch. And I think that just speaks to any single player on this roster is good enough to get in there and make a play on any given down. So, I mean, it's just really about the competition. And I think Florida State fans, they've got to be excited about that, because that breeds growth.
100%. Let's jump into a few things here. D-Lou, let's just go to quarterback. And as our title is, is this an actual quarterback competition? Let's just talk between DJU and also Brock Glenn here. Just seems like from your piece here at NoleGameday.com, you put in a good rundown here, what you're seeing from DJ and the growth that he is getting into this system, connecting Sims, like he's building some chemistry with a handful of guys. Hakeem Williams here had a nice catch from DJ in tempo drills. But then just the deep ball. What to you is the difference so far? You've had enough practices now. What's the biggest difference on the field with Jordan Travis? We saw a lot of Jordan Travis practices, but also when you flip over to DJ, what are those biggest differences to you guys so the listeners can know?
I would say it's just really how effortless it is for him to throw the deep ball, and also the velocity that he throws the ball with. I mean, man, some of the strength that he's able to put into these passes is insane. And I mean, we're watching yesterday, the quarterbacks are standing about midfield on the practice field, like on the Seminole Head logo, basically throwing fades on air to the wide receivers in the end zone. And I mean, we're talking about 50-yard passes here. And even still, DJU, he's cranking these things back. I mean, when he's hitting the receiver, he's hitting them in the back of the end zone. Like, there's a ton of power on these footballs. And some of the other quarterbacks, not even able to get it past the goal line when they're getting to their intended targets. I mean, there's definitely a difference in his arm strength compared to maybe some of the other players on the roster at this point. And I also think, sometimes that can lead to touch problems. I mentioned the velocity. Sometimes maybe those short throws are a little bit harder than they necessarily should be. But when you just get a chance to watch him sling it to some of these players on air, it's just like, man, he's putting out there effortlessly, but that's also an extremely powerful football coming out of his hands.
Also a big ass dude. That's a big boy.
That it is. And that was something that kind of messed with Florida State's defense a little bit yesterday, doing some of those RPOs. I don't think we got to see him keep one yesterday, but his ability to move, he's more dynamic than you would think at 255 pounds. Like, he's able to get out into the open field and definitely move a little bit. And, if you're a linebacker or a safety coming down, you don't want to try and hit a 255-pound DJU. But on some of these RPOs, he just keeps the defense honest because they know they still have to account for him. And if he does keep the football, they're going to have to come in there strong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's got such a strong base as well. It's just seeing. I'm interested to see how Tony Tokarz works with him and that developmental area, because this is a guy that's been in college for a very long time. There's still quite a bit that he's got to work on, and I'm interested to see how that works out with Tokarz and what he's been able to do with some previous guys that have come through this room. But just him getting down the offense, I think, is a huge sign. Also, to building more chemistry, they'll do a lot of that too once spring camp ends. They'll be out there and they'll continue to build that, but just you won't have that kind of full speed 11-on-11 per se in the summer. So now is a pivotal time to make sure you're building that chemistry while you have the schemes that you're going against and reading the defenses and such. It's a little bit different. And then going over to, Brock Glenn, what have you seen specifically from him? I think the number one thing that stands out to me in your practice report that I was reading this morning is that he's understanding the pocket a little bit better. That's something that we talked about from whenever he faced Florida. Not great in anything there on that, but then also to jumping into the ACC championship, you could tell a true freshman quarterback, that pocket pressure, understanding which side where that's coming from, and also pulling up, something that could help him in a lot of ways because you see the intelligence there. It's just understanding that awareness. But you threw that in there. You thought as a pocket passer and understanding where his pressure was coming from, you saw some growth there. With that, also, what have you seen from Glenn, 2.5 weeks into this?
Yeah, it's been a mixed bag with the pocket presence, because that was something that I kind of noted earlier in the spring. I felt like he was performing pretty well as far as throwing the ball in the 1-on-1s and 7-on-7s. But then when he got into the 11-on-11 and actually having the defense, coming after him and everything, it kind of felt like he was struggling at times. That was something I noted on Tuesday. It seemed like he definitely took a step forward there, where there were some plays where the defense brought pressure or came with a blitz on one side, and Glenn was able to recognize it, step up, move to where he needs to be while keeping his eyes downfield and delivering the football to the wide receivers. And one play that stood out to me in particular, he got flushed off the backside, basically had to climb the pocket and then eventually roll out to his left, where he was able to hit Jalen Lucas on the sideline. So I think you're really seeing Brock, raise his level of play, especially with DJ coming in to compete in this quarterback room. But, like you said, Logan, a guy who's very locked in there to the coaching with Tony Tokarz, constantly talking with his receivers after plays. He's a very vocal guy. I would say DJ a little bit more reserved in that regard, maybe, but I like what I'm seeing out of both these guys so far, and I would definitely say that this is a true quarterback competition. And right now Brock Glenn has the edge as far as experience in the system. DJU has the edge as far as experience at the college level and what he's been able to do at Clemson and Oregon State. And these guys are both jockeying for position right now and going out there and giving it their best each day. I think we've seen some real good moments, we've seen some bad moments, and really it's going to be who's more consistent here moving into the rest of spring practice and then carrying that over into fall camp.
I think with him going through the bowl game, also to the ACC championship and the turmoil and, the unknowing of, oh, shit, I'm starting in the friggin' ACC championship game in a few days rather than having an actual prep by chance of what you had just a week. Nonetheless, though, him getting thrown into that fire he already had confidence, you could tell naturally, but that just added a lot to his confidence. And, just him representing himself too at the bowl game as we were there covering that, just listening to him talking to reporters and everything. he has established himself as, you want to think, as a true freshman. It felt like he was a guy that's been in the system for at least 2 years. And that's why exactly Florida State did a really good job at recruiting and getting to know him as a player, but also to off the field. And this guy has been a really good, great for the locker room as well. But just going to, how he's going through the system, taking those strides, I think is going to be huge for Florida State. And depth you're going to need, if DJ gets to start this upcoming season, having Glenn there and having that progress is huge for Florida State moving forward.
And I think those experiences last year have really motivated him because, looking at the ACC championship and obviously the Orange Bowl against Georgia, there's a lot of things that he knows that he can do better and probably should have done better in those games. And, it seems like he's trying to make those improvements during spring practice while also, competing for the starting job and hoping to get out there and show the fans and the country what he can really do.
I've got 2 players I want to bring up on offense before we go to defense, and you can talk about some more offensive guys as well. But someone that you noted thought he had the best spring practice yet for him. This is the veteran running back, Lawrence Toafili, Baby 9, like Carlos Williams calls him. Baby 9 seemed like he was having some really good on Tuesday afternoon for you guys to watch. What do you see from LT here? Because I think a lot of FSU fans look at him as, a number 1 running back, but he's never had that solidification, kind of like what you had with before that with Deshaun Corbin, then with Trey Benson, and then over here now with Lawrence Toafili. What have you seen from overall in camp, but then what stood out to you on Tuesday?
Yeah, he was awesome, man. And really looking at Tuesday's practice, it was just the decisiveness. I mean, he was hitting these holes with really a violence almost, I would say. And I mean, there were points where Mike Norvell was coming over to him after the runs and, being like, good job, LT. Like that's the way you hit the hole. And he was also getting some real good blocking from his offensive linemen. But I mean, yeah, just the way he was using his vision, his patience, his agility. And he also had a couple of nice open field moves, one on a guy who, we gave some compliments to earlier, Marvin Jones Jr., but had a spin move on Marvin Jones Jr. to create some space in the open field. I'm not sure if maybe that would have gone different in an actual game. Obviously, the running backs aren't normally tackled to the ground in majority of Florida State's practices. Maybe MJJ slings been down in a real game, but at least at this point, LT got a move on him. But yeah, so far this spring, he's another guy. He's been here for years. He's been bringing that leadership for a while, but now the elder statesman in that running back room feels like he's even taken it in higher regard to be a leader in this running back room and kind of set the example. And I think everyone knows by this point, LT, maybe not the most vocal guy. He leads by what he does on the field, but we are seeing him do some more talking to some of those younger guys, following plays and, making sure to hype them up after they make big plays themselves. So, I mean, it's exciting to see for a guy who's been here so long to continue to improve. And I also think he's added a little bit more muscle to his frame as well, which is helping him out early in spring.
LT, I think, has one of the best visions has had the best vision, kind of patience, I should say, too, in the last couple of years in Florida State's running back room. If you think about it, the start for Trey Benson last year, really quick to hit things and wasn't allowed to play in the holes to open up on themselves at the front with the offensive line. LT, a little bit more patient, and let's be honest, Florida State's probably top playmaker and explosive plays, I will say, honestly. He is a fun player to watch, and just the plays that he's made all throughout his career at Florida State, and just going back to against Clemson a couple of years ago, like this guy just continues to make explosive plays for Florida State. So it's easy to kind of overlook him a little bit just because of how much talent's in that running back room. But like Joseph's here saying on YouTube, he's got LT going over 1,200 all-purpose yards, but that's just kind of running back that you get from him. I kind of think of like Rachaad White with the Buccaneers. You got him there. Yeah, he can run, but he also is a really great pass catcher and can make plays down the field with his vision. So I'm really excited for LT, and seeing him and hearing him having a really good practice there is really promising. Player that I brought up, I just hopped on a Spaces with former Nole James Coleman It was actually last night, and I hate it because I did not be able to read. I wasn't able to read your observations until this morning, and I called out KP, and I said, I'm worried not worried because it's a good thing. Yeah, that you got some young talent coming up and is vying and fighting for playing time and could take your spot. But I did point out, we've got to see KP take these strides with Kentron Poitier, take those strides, and because you know how well he is and catching the ball. He's a natural pass catcher, has probably one of the best hands on the team. We see it at practice all the time. He was the king of the spring last camp. But wearing the number 1 now, expected to be a starter. I want things to go well. You want to have Kentron be a starter and this offense going over to Ireland. I want to see Kentron be a starter. So that's why I kind of called him out, but seemed like he had a pretty impressive practice. I'll bring up the catch here, one-handed snag that he had. But D-Lou, what did you see on Tuesday from Tron that impressed you?
Well, yeah, it was really that catch that you need to bring up. He's had some really fun battles, and we've talked about AZ getting the best of him at times earlier in the spring, and maybe it hasn't been the most consistent start for Kentron as he continues to work his way back from a leg injury that hampered him for most of that 2023 campaign, and really stopped him from showing those flashes that we saw last spring at this time, because he was a guy that we had dubbed King of the Spring. And I mean, that was at a time when Florida State had Johnny Wilson and some real talented guys on the rosters before Keon had gotten to Florida State yet. But I mean, he was a standout a year ago, and it was unfortunate to see him limited for a lot of last year. But now coming into this spring, it's another thing where, we've talked about DJ Lundy in that linebacker room. We talked about Kyle Morlock, I think last week in the tight end room. Kentron needs to be the guy in that wide receiver room. And I mean, he's got all the tools, the frame, 6'4". You can see it right there with his ability to go and make a big play, using all of that frame, all of that wingspan to reach out and snag a pass with one hand. And, you saw it even last year at times in limited reps. He had that huge catch in the Orange Bowl against Georgia. He had a crazy one against Wake Forest as well that Austin was able to see in person. Whenever he's been on the field, he's a guy that has produced. You look back to that 2022 campaign, I think he had 4 touchdown catches and 14 total receptions. So he's shown big playability, and really just comes down to consistency and staying healthy for Kentron, I think.
Yeah, I want to see Kentron start. It's just there's a lot of competition there, but about staying healthy, he's got one of the, intelligence-wise, getting down. He's been in the system for so long, so he knows what Norvell likes, Ron Dugans, and what they're going to try to do offensively. But he's just too much of a threat. It's just staying healthy, and it was. We'll see. Definitely a nice catch, though. One-handed snag. I would have bet you, though, Norvell or Coach Yak yelled 2 hands. Did you hear that?
I don't know if I heard that. There was a lot of celebrating going on. So
yeah, I would imagine.
That would have been a hard one to grab. That would have been a hard one to grab with 2 hands, I think.
No, but still, it was hilarious. Coach Yak is always yelling, no matter what. If it's definitely like this, you have to have one-handed. You have to have a one hand for that, just for you to come down with it. Still, you're going to get chewed out for not trying to catch it with 2 hands. And also, who was in coverage there? AZ, like you're saying. That's good competition right there, in my opinion. And who was throwing that ball, too? Luke Kromenhoek, true freshman. As we were talking about earlier, that's a nice ball placement, in my opinion, too, for that size of wide receiver. Over Azare, which Azare, as we're talking physical attributes, that kid is also really impressive, too. So I thought that was a really nice throw from Luke. Anything else you want to note on offensively before I jump into defense? I keep on telling everybody to go over to NoleGameday.com. You have a full-on, literal rundown of what happened in practices if you guys want to go over there, because we could spend 2 hours just chatting it up on practice alone. But go ahead if you have anything more offensively.
Yeah, it's about 2,000 words, this one. Pretty fat practice report from yesterday. But I want to mention Jalen Lucas again. We talked about his speed, and let's just say it is legit. It is advertised, and now it is reported. Shaheem Brown talked after practice yesterday, said that Jalen Lucas hit 22.6 to 22.8 miles per hour on one of his runs in practice. I mean, we're talking about zone speed here, ladies and gentlemen. It's legit.
That shit's fast.
And then also
just
Jeremiah.
For reference, real quick, Tyreek Hill hit 23.20 or 23.34. That's his highest speed that he's hit. I think that was this last season as well. So
that's
just
pretty
right
insane.
right there with Tyreek Hill.
That is insane. But yeah, that speed. Whenever he gets in the open field, he just looks different from some of the other guys on the roster. Also wanted to mention Jeremiah Byers. Feel like he's starting to develop into a really solid right tackle for Florida State. I mean, we'd already kind of seen it last year during the 2023 season, but just feels like he's been really consistent. Seeing him in not only 11 on 11, but also some of these one-on-one pass rushing drills. Had 2 wins yesterday against Patrick Payton, one of them where he was able to kind of put him down on the ground a little bit and also beat Justin Cryer. So, I mean, like some of those signs. And also got to give Lucas Simmons a shout out. Had some promising blocks in 11 on 11, one to open up a big run for, I want to say that it was Toa Philly, but I'll have to look back on that to verify. But either way, he was a big part of that one. And then also in one-on-ones, he lost to Blake Nicholson, but then he had a really good rep after that. And then Bryson Estes, let's give the offensive lineman a couple of shout outs here. He was able to get up and help create a big run for Florida State for, I want to say, Cam Davis getting up to the second level and just laying a pancake on one of the true freshman linebackers, putting him on the ground. So the offensive linemen were really getting after it on Tuesday.
I like hearing that. Definitely like Lucas Simmons, who this staff was heavily after and their recruitment for him, but just want to see him develop as well. It could end up being a stud for Florida State and his future too. So I love the trenches. I love hearing things and good things coming from the trenches, but we're not going to stay in the trenches though. We're defense. We're going to the backfield. I want to talk Conrad Hussey. I need updates on Conrad Hussey because he's starting to become one of my favorite players to talk about, cover everything imaginable. Great shot here. Don't like the throw if that one's going to Lawrence Toa Philly there in the back of the end zone, but nonetheless, just look at the physical stretch from Conrad Hussey here, grabbing that interception in the end zone, which is really important to Adam Fuller and Mike Norvell. Mike Norvell will jump on top of you. Seen it happen multiple times. If you grab an interception in the end zone, he's going to jump on top of you to celebrate with you. But can we talk some Conrad Hussey, D-Lou? I think me, along with VZ and also the FSU fans, need an update here. And this is a really nice snag from practice on Tuesday.
Yeah, this one actually came in one-on-ones. And if you had the video, it didn't look as bad of a throw on paper, but it was just the instincts and the closing ability. And I mean, you can see right there, the ball skills for Conrad Hussey to get over there and snag that one on the side of the end zone there at the goal line to create a really big turnover. But man, I think physically he's really taken a step in the right direction. His body has really made some improvements compared to where it was last year. I think he's filled out a little bit more. And, it's kind of similar to Darrell Jackson, but Florida State, they just want to see more consistency out of Conrad Hussey. And that's kind of going to be pivotal here as he enters his second year with the Seminoles, competing for a starting job opposite of Shaheem Brown. Obviously, you've got Devontae Brown coming in from Miami, who's got a ton of experience back there as well, fighting for some of those snaps. And, we've seen Ashlyn Barker and KJ Kirkland have their fair of flashes. But, Adam Fuller actually was asked about Conrad Hussey yesterday and talked about him. He said, talking about expectation. Last year we managed it, but this year is a different expectation, and you've got to continue to meet those expectations. I mean, it sounds like this staff is really challenging Hussey because they know how good he is. They know how talented he can be if he's just a little bit more consistent of a player. And, you can look at these practice reports. This isn't the first interception that he's created so far this spring. He's making improvements in the right direction. I think the staff, they just want to do their part to get their very best out of him.
Mm-hmm. You noted too on Azrae Thomas here having an impressive practice as well. I had a good rep there with Kentron, but one thing he kind of had a little there, but then dialed back in and popped Cam Davis. Poor Cam. Well, I'm not going to say Cam Davis because this man's in the weight room. He looks like a third-year guy. Looks like a grown-ass man. So not going to feel bad for you, Cam. But still, as a true freshman, you got AZ coming down at you. Probably is not too fun. But Azrae has been kind of one of those guys, who I feel like that has just kind of been on that consistency train of making plays since camp begun.
He's taken that next step, and it sounds like Mike Norvell and Adam Fuller both believe that he can be that next rising star on Florida State's defense. And I mean, they need him to be, with Renardo Green moving on to the next level. You know, he's got to step into a very big role for the Seminoles, and it sounds like he's dedicated himself off the field and on the field to get in the best position to do that. AZ, you know, this is potentially a money year for him, and I think he's realized that. And you know, I've mentioned the chip that I've seen on his shoulder throughout spring practice, really competitive. When you know, constantly match up with Kentron, who we've talked about, and these guys take that matchup extremely seriously. And you know, he beat him. I'm talking about AZ beat Kentron on their first rep and one-on-ones, got in front of him, and I mean, had an interception, ball hit him in the hands, but just fell to the turf. And I mean, he was really upset with himself, and he was even more upset after Kentron made that highlight reel catch over him in the end zone. But then after that, you know, for a defensive back, basically you've got to lose your memory and just move on to the next play. And I thought AZ did a really good job of that. And for the rest of practice, I don't think he gave up a play, and it felt like he was constantly making them on the other end. And like you mentioned in the practice report, came up and put his nose down and put a hit on Cam Davis there on the sideline. And I mean, that's a big running back for a cornerback to go have a collision with and run support. And AZ wasn't afraid to mix it up.
Loco Ocho, baby. Timmy Jernigan would be proud. That's a special number if you're wearing that on defense for Florida State. Go back to also Jalen Ramsey. This one's really, and I need to slap myself for keep on not forgetting his name, but I don't include him when I talk about younger linebackers. But DeMarco Ward seems to be making some in Florida State's defense in a variety of different ways, at least in your snippet here, D-Lou, both in blitz, grabbing a sack on Brock Glenn, but then also too being really physical there with Brian Courtney. I think to me the most impressive though, you know, sticking with Jalen Brown and coverage there during team drills, which as we've heard the last couple of weeks, Jalen Brown is a very fast and shifty guy. What about DeMarco Ward as stood out to you in your practice report as I fix my mic after this?
This was definitely the most that he showed up during a single practice at this point of the spring. And like you said, it's kind of easy to forget about him a little bit just because Florida State, you know, DJ Lundy, Sean Murphy, Omar Graham, Blake Nicholson, Justin Cryer. You've got the true freshmen, Tamir Hickman-Collins and Jaden Parrish. So it's a little bit easy to forget about DeMarco, especially, you know, after last year where he kind of dealt with some injuries that limited his availability in practice at times. But I mean, man, on Tuesday, he was just kind of all over the place and really got it started with that hit on Brian Courtney early on in team drills where, you know, Courtney caught a short pass from DJU and DeMarco was right there to put a stick on him. And then later on, you know, it wasn't a route downfield that Jalen Brown had. It was kind of a end around. So going laterally across the line of scrimmage, and DeMarco was able to stick there, get his head in, make a tackle for loss. Later covered Jalen Lucas out of the backfield, delivered a hit as soon as he was there. So just to see some of his ability to move with some of these faster offensive players in space, you know, Jalen Brown and Lucas, especially two of the faster guys on this Florida State roster, for him to keep up with them and make those stops was big, and his instincts to be in the right position as well. So, I mean, that's maybe someone that a lot of people don't think about when they talk about that linebacker room, but you know, I would say there's a lot of young players and there's a lot of room for DeMarco to grow, and he's shown some of those signs so far.
Anything else defensively before we move on to a new hire on Florida State's coaching staff?
Yeah, I would just say outside of Hussey true freshman Kai Bates and walk-on defensive back Christian White also able to create interceptions during Tuesday's practice. And also noted down to Miwa, who we mentioned earlier, but as someone that stood out with his versatility, just moving inside and outside. And I believe he was able to get a sack at one point in team drills later in practice.
Nice.
Oh, and also, sorry to cut you off, but also Blake Nicholson was a huge part of the defense getting a fourth down stop late in practice, like a fourth and one type of scenario. And I mean, they just absolutely, led by Blake Nicholson, just crushed that line of scrimmage.
Nice. Does Blake look like he's added size from last season to you?
Yeah, not like a tremendous amount of size, but you can tell he's got some more muscle, a little bit more weight on his frame. And I mean, he's still moving really well, as a coverage linebacker. And I mean, that's going to be a huge part of him getting on the field during his second year at Florida State.
Florida State, staying in this linebacker room, gentlemen, made a big hire here. Florida State has brought in, and we kind of already knew this. He was around in practices and everything, but Florida State finally made it official on April 1st. Wasn't April Fool's either, but Florida State is bringing in Ernie Sims, or has already brought in Ernie Sims, former Florida State great at the linebacker position. Like you said, Dustin, you had been telling us a little bit, he had been there at the practice and everything, didn't want to jump fully into it until everything became official, but he's going to be joining the staff as a defensive analyst. I'm personally a big fan of Ernie Sims, kind of knew him a little bit while I was younger, when I was around the program a little bit more, but this is what Ernie Sims said about joining Mike Norvell and the Florida State staff. He said, "I'm excited for this opportunity to return to Florida State. Tallahassee is my home, and Florida State University played a vital role in my development on and off the field. I've taken lessons that I have learned here with me throughout my career, so the opportunity to come back and contribute again to the football program is incredibly meaningful to me. It's been rewarding to watch Coach Norvell build this program back among the best in the nation. I'm grateful to be joining this staff and can't wait to see what the future has in store for Florida State." I think this is a phenomenal hire. I don't think anybody would argue with that. Definitely as being someone that has come through this program before, but also to his coaching that he's learned throughout his career to post football on the field for himself. I think it's really solid there, and just the different little things that he can be able to contribute is huge. And you can just see too what Florida State, with Mike Norvell, I should say, has done a really good job of, and it's a trend now. And I think it's just going to stay put, is bringing on a lot of these former Noles, former greats, some that have been in the coaching a little bit, giving them chances here to grow if they want to expand their coaching experience. But too, we could maybe see Ernie Sims, later down the road be a solidified position coach at that linebacker room, just depending on how things work out the next couple of years. But just to have him on staff, I think as me, along with a lot of Florida State fans, people that cover the team, I think this is a really nice pickup for Mike Norvell and that defensive staff.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with this one. I mean, you bring home Florida State great, Tallahassee native, someone who had a really good, obviously a top first-round pick, and someone who had a good NFL career, but now also someone Ernie Sims, who has blossomed into a now successful coach. And, we talked about it, I think last week or maybe the week before that, but has spent time at multiple FBS programs in the state of Florida, kind of got started there back when Lane Kiffin was the head coach of Florida Atlantic. He was there for a couple of years, ended up at USF, where he was linebackers coach and co-defensive coordinator as well for a little bit. And then also most recently linebackers coach at UCF under Gus Malzahn for a year. So, I mean, he's earned some real experience.
Wait, did you say Malzahn or Malzahn?
He did. No, he said Malzahn, like a calzone.
Whatever.
All right, keep going. Sorry.
Either way,
got to check up on these things.
He's earned, you also said Poitier earlier, and it's Poitier, which we've talked about. But
I fell for your trap because you're the one that set us up in that Poitier thing way back when. So I fell for it. I'm just going to stick with Tron or KP moving forward.
Yep.
Moving on. moving on. Good pickup for Florida State here. And, Ernie Sims has already been out there working with his defense now for a couple of weeks. And it's going to be interesting to see what he can contribute to this program moving forward. And like you said, maybe a potential position coach one day.
I just love the pedigree of Ernie Sims. One of the few ever perfect rated recruits coming out of high school on 247 with the Vince Youngs and Jadeveon Clowneys. Like you mentioned, Tallahassee native, so he knows the area. He knows the school. Got to wear 34 because Ron Sellers led him. I love it. I think it's going to be great for the program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nice pickup from Mike Norvell and the staff there. Two real quick before we jump into anything else, I want to mention from Ian Rappaport. Got some news on Trey Benson. He's currently in Dallas right now, visiting with the Dallas Cowboys. A visit taking place today and also tomorrow. So this was a team too really focused and keen on scouting Trey Benson. So something to watch out for. Would be fun though. Here's the deal. I don't have much of a problem with Dallas. I know a lot of people hate Dallas and such, but
I don't like him. I'll go on record.
Imagine Benson saves Dallas. I don't want to win a Super Bowl. Well, I want Trey Benson to win the Super Bowl. Absolutely. But not after Russell Wilson takes me to the ship. But maybe that Lombardi. But yeah, he's going over to Dallas Cowboys. I'm sure a lot of people don't like hearing that, but massive market. I need it. I want it. Brings in the clicks. Dallas Cowboys, most biggest team in the country across all pro sports. So sign me up. But yeah, he's visiting right now, and we'll finish off his visit on Thursday. So we're going to do a lot more of a dive deep into the NFL draft. Deep dive. I just said
Deep
that
dive.
completely like opposite there. A deep dive into the NFL draft and a handful of other things, some mock drafts as well. So we'll be getting that done for you guys in the coming weeks. So anything else football wise that y'all wanted to bring up? Maybe this Mike Norvell reveals text to the FSU football program, specifically the players, that was released today. I can bring that up here. This is a text message that he mass sent to the players after Florida State got snubbed from the college football playoff. This is what he said, and I can't see what this says above it there. What does that say? I can't really tell. We're going to have to get someone on that. But it starts off, I am so very grateful for you, and I'll never take one day for granted. But today we can stand up, stand tall, and we go get better. A lot of ways to deal with adversity. You can stop, turn around, crawl under it, or try to avoid it. Keep your eyes up and climb over it. I love you guys more than you ever know. Do not let this world keep you from your potential because they are not in control of our best. One day at a time. That was sent at 7:46 in the morning. So obviously, not a fun kind of position for Mike Norvell to be in and everything. But I thought that was a pretty nice message there. And I mean, what else can you say at that point? I mean, it just turned out to be a complete shit show and everything. But Florida State not getting a chance there in the playoffs. It blows, but I think we're starting to see that kind of chip on the shoulder heading into this 2024 season, and definitely in camp so far. Highly competitive. And, a lot of these guys that got, the chance that would have been playing in this playoff game this last year, they've moved on. They're heading to the NFL draft and everything, but there's some bad taste left in some of these youngsters that they saw their veterans, those guys that were ahead of them on the depth chart, go through and have that disappointment. And we're seeing a really nice spring camp so far. But yeah, any thoughts on Mike Norvell's message to the team after getting snubbed from the college football playoff selection? I'm not going to say anything more.
I think it just says a lot about the type of person that he is, to remain optimistic and to keep pushing forward in that moment. I think it also just shows, whether it's behind closed doors or on the practice field or through a text message, Mike Norvell, he's always that same guy. He's always carrying that same mentality. And yeah, I think Florida State fans, I mean, should feel lucky that they're able to keep this guy around for the long term.
Yeah, very thankful he's our coach. I also like how it was Monday morning that it was sent, so he was processing it like the rest of us, where I just spent all Sunday afternoon in my bed and didn't want to talk to anybody because I was so mad. I like to think he was doing the same, even though I know he wasn't.
Yeah.
Just very thankful that he's our coach and decided to stick around for the long haul.
Yep. I think he too was off on a lot of visits too immediately
Yeah,
afterward
he was
as well.
He probably sent that text message from a helicopter because they pretty much had to go out and start recruiting immediately, which, I mean, just absolutely brutal timing on that front as well.
Everything. There was a lot of different factors going on. Guys contemplating in the transfer portal, a lot of chatter going on. So a lot of things happening at once. And, Florida State was able to condense that and figure it out. It took a little bit of time, but things get figured out. So let's jump over to some basketball to end off the show. VZ, it's been a busy week. There's a lot to kind of run down here real quick, but throw us through what's been happening for Leonard Hamilton and the basketball squad.
Yeah, so we'll start with a couple minor departures first. Sophomore guard Tom House and freshman big man Waka Mbach. I'm sure I pronounced that wrong. They both hit the portal yesterday, and for those that are listening on a different day, that was Tuesday. Neither were a surprise. House only played, I want to say, 23 games this year, averaged 3.5 minutes per game, but did shoot 47% from three, and I'm sure that's what some of these smaller schools that are looking at him are looking at. His initial list of contacts was released today. It was Indiana State, Akron, Ohio, Furman, some of those smaller schools where I kind of expect him to end up. And today was the big one. A lot of people were surprised by this one. I wasn't as much. Sophomore big Cam Corrin hit transfer portal. It'd been kind of rumored a little bit in the last week or so. It was definitely one of the names I was monitoring. Kind of seems like Leonard Hamilton and the staff want to go back to having traditional 7-footers. And Corrin's not 7 feet. He's 6'9", 6'10", more of an offensive-minded player. Not that he can't play defensively. I actually thought he played some great defense in the NC State game against DJ Burns, who's now in the Final Four on the back of DJ Burns. But just doesn't seem like it's a long-term fit. I'm a huge fan of Corrin. I think he's going to succeed at wherever he ends up. But definitely the biggest loss of the portal so far. None of the rest, to me, have been big losses so far. We'll see where it ends up. At this point, it's just easier to list who's still on the roster. And that's Jalen Worley, Taylor Bobo, and Chandler Jackson. And that's about it. Jameer Watkins still up in the air. We'll see. Florida State's got to get some bigs in the transfer portal. They don't really have a choice. And they also have 2 incoming freshmen. We already talked about Daquan Davis last week. AJ Swinton has been committed and signed for a while. They may or may not end up with another high school signee. We'll see what happens. I know Coach Hamilton wants to take one more, but who that is, I have absolutely no idea. We'll just see what happens there. One of their transfer targets did come off the board today. Terrence Edwards Jr. from James Madison. He'd been visiting Florida State, got in late Monday. Most of the visit was on Tuesday. Then he gets to Louisville and pretty much commits instantly. So that sucked. But Florida State still being active in the transfer portal. Really sucks to see Corrin go. Dustin, I think, was as upset as anybody once I put that in the Discord. But definitely a big blow. But if they get the right person to replace him, I'm not going to complain whatsoever. You're muted.
Oh, you're muted.
So it's painful because if he's really no longer with the program because he's not 7 foot, I don't think he fits what Florida State wants to do. I think it's more of that. And I think he sees it as, I can go somewhere where I'm not being asked to play on the perimeter so much. I guess he had some really good games down the stretch.
No, he did. At Pitt, 25 and 8. His free throw shooting finally started to come back to life the last month or so of the season. I agree. He had some huge moments, and even his freshman year when I don't think anybody really expected him to play, and he was very easy Florida State's best big man. Granted, it was a very bad year in 22-23, but he was arguably the lone bright spot that season. Showed some more flashes down the stretch of this year. I'm not disagreeing that it sucks to see him go, but again, if they get the right guy to replace him, I'm not going to be upset.
Just makes me not as confident with what FSU is trying to do up front moving into this next season because they just don't really have traction with anybody.
We'll see. It's still so early. We still have basically a month for people to enter the portal. And Coach Hamilton has said consistently he's more willing to lean on the transfer portal this offseason. Until I see who they bring in, I'm not going to judge it yet. If they bring in a bunch of guys I've never heard of, then yeah, I'll be upset. But if you could find a way to land Golden at FAU or some of these other kids, then I'll be pretty happy.
And also, I mean, Bull Bowen, he's going to take a heck of a step forward.
Yeah. It was going to have to be that way no matter what. As
even
high,
bigger now.
Yeah, but it's one of those, as high as we are in his potential, no matter what, he was going to have to take a big step next year with Bob Miller entering the portal. Now it's one of those, is he going to play the 4? Is he going to play the 5? Is he going to bounce back and forth? We'll see. But he was going to have to take a big step either way, even if they bring in a guy like Jerry Dane, who's visiting next weekend. Bull Bowen still has to take a massive step that we all know he can't take. I think his potential is pretty limitless.
How are things going on?
Got to keep Jameer.
Jameer's a big one. Yeah, I saw the FSU basketball post earlier. A couple days ago or something.
It was a few days ago.
Highlight, yeah.
And everyone's like, "Oh, what does this mean?"
When
in reality, it didn't mean anything. And shout out the Instagram page for messing the post up. And it was only the first 2 seconds of the video. It's been one of those years.
Gotta get it together.
And everyone's just like, "What is this about? Is he back? Is he gone?" I don't think it really meant anything. Honestly, he's been very quiet. I still think he's undecided. I still don't think he knows what he wants to do yet. I could be wrong, and by the time I wake up tomorrow, he'll be somewhere else. But I truly don't think he knows yet.
True. We'll see, but definitely need him back, 100%. Anything else, gentlemen, from you guys? Except for birthday bash, VZ.
I'm just ready. I'm ready for the NFL draft. I'm so stoked. I know we're going to cover the next few weeks, but I'm ready to see where some of these guys end up. This is about the time where you see those top 30 visits roll in, and we were talking beforehand how some of these guys haven't been reported yet, like Jared Verse, Renardo Green. So we'll see if those start rolling in the next week or two.
Yeah, no, the NFL draft is going to be super, super fun, and it's going to be that way for the next couple of years for Florida State, just the way that Mike Norvell is developing these guys and putting them out. And, I think just for what FSU has, there's been some outlets now, some national outlets thinking, it's 10 plus. Could be in that 11 range that Florida State gets drafted. Even some guys that don't get technically drafted, they're going to be one of the top picked out for getting them out onto a practice squad. Like, it's going to be pretty quick that those guys get snagged. So it's going to be super, super fun to cover, follow, everything imaginable. And we're going to set up a good system for you guys to give you all the best coverage as possible all across everything, social media, the show here on Hear the Spear, the site at NoleGameday.com, everything. We're going to try to do our best for you guys. So appreciate everybody hanging out with us. Had a lot of viewers on this evening. Before you leave, smack that like button if you're on YouTube. It helps us get more FSU viewers to come in here and chat it up and give us some topics to talk about and throw us some questions every week we're on here. We're here every Wednesday evening at 7 p.m. If you're on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, hit that subscribe button. Always got new episodes dropping on there, just the audio version for you guys if you want to listen in the car or if you're at the gym or on a walk. We're on audio as well. So appreciate everybody. Y'all have a great rest of y'all's week. We will talk to you guys next Wednesday and hopefully soon too. Hopefully have some good news and bring on a guest for you guys as well before we do get into the NFL draft. But Donna, Carol, Jim, Terrell, thank you guys. Y'all be good. Enjoy the rest of y'all's week. And we will talk to you guys next Wednesday at 7 p.m. Peace.